One of my Patreon supporters wrote to me saying, quote, "I remember going to California's Channel Islands on a field trip and hearing all these rationalizations for the slaughter of wild pigs on the islands. A depressing and alienating experience. Murder in the name of wildlife management or eco-friendliness is still murder. Veganism, if it's at all about the animals, and it will always be partly about animals, should work to end the practices of hunting and culling as much as animal farming." And then he gives a source discussing this further. Now see what I do here in my reply. So this is a supporter of my channel, but someone who disagrees with my fundamental political position, what I call wildlife management paradigm, my approach to veganism, animal rights, etc. Quote, "I disagree. I'm not a utopian philosopher. I'm an historical nihilist. Thus, for example, I do not believe we are working towards a future world in which vegans never kill rats, or in which park rangers never kill large mammals, nor a world in which war is obsolete. I believe we live in a world in which humans will continue killing rats forever, even if 5% of the population becomes vegan, even if 100% of the world becomes vegan, and so on for park rangers, war, etc. Now, if you read academic and theoretical tracts within the vegan political demimonde, you will actually see many vegans making precisely the opposite claims to what I've said here. There are vegans who claim that if just 10% of the population becomes vegan, famously Direct Action Everywhere claims if just 3.5%, they have a specific number, if 3.5% of people become vegan, there will be all these wonderful changes as a result. Some people claim that war will cease to exist. Some people claim that racism and bigotry will cease to exist. That the end of speciesism brought about by the vegan awakening is going to have all these wonderful knock-on consequences. And I don't believe that at all. Moreover, fundamentally, I do not believe that if people become vegan, they will be able to stop killing rats. Right? And this is a sticking point. It's interesting to me when I talk to vegans who've really never thought it through. No, in order to farm wheat, in order to have urban populations, actually killing rats is going to continue too. And the example that kicked all this off, yes, killing wild animals, often in the name of ecology, often in order to maintain that ecosystem, to maintain that forest or what have you, that kind of violence against animals is going to continue forever, because I'm not a utopian philosopher. I'm not an extremist. I'm not an animal rights extremist. I'm not a vegan extremist. I'm a moderate, but I'm a principled moderate. People seem to associate being a moderate politically with compromise. But if you're in a position of perpetual compromise, even if you're a moderate at the beginning of the political process, you won't be a moderate by the end. Within the Western world, in many ways, my views and values are moderate, but they're actually based on very inflexible principles that make me, I think, despised by people standing to the left of me, people standing to the right of me. It makes you very easy to despise all around, even though your position may indeed be moderate and well-intended, and so on. Within veganism, I think that really is the sort of narrow, difficult precipice I have to stand on at all times. Politically, I'm misperceived from all angles. I think people who are more conservative than me probably perceive me as being left-wing when I'm not. And I think probably people who are left-wing perceive me as being conservative when I'm not. And it seems like the world makes no place for me. Certainly Canada makes no place for me. Let's not generalize about the whole world. Canadian politics and politics in the United States, there is no place for me in the political spectrum to take a seat, neither on the left nor the right nor in the center. And why is that? It's because although my views are moderate, they are really very principled and inflexible, right? Give you a couple of really simple examples that might surprise some of you. There are all kinds of things I feel we should tolerate as a society. I just genuinely do not see why currently it's fashionable for so many governments to tolerate and really encourage gambling. Now, I'm not a conventional Christian. I'm not Christian at all. Sorry, I'm a nihilistic atheist. It's not that I oppose, gambling for hokey, old-fashioned reasons of that kind. But on the level of public policy, there are many vices that I understand why the government wants to tolerate them or even encourage them and tax them. But to have the government running casinos on a for-profit basis seems to me fundamentally very immoral. To see the government running prisons on a for-profit basis, to have private corporations signing contracts with the government to run prisons at a profit seems to me so fundamentally and self-evidently immoral. And this one, again, may surprise some of you in some ways. I mean, again, terms like left and right start to become meaningless. I still do not understand why nobody else is alarmed by the fundamental assumption in countries like the United States and Canada that hospitals run at a profit, that you have for-profit corporations in the medical sector. And not all countries do this. I note that Japan is one example of a modern, westernized country that has hospitals that are very similar aesthetically to what you'd expect in a European hospital or a Canadian hospital or American hospital. But all of the hospitals have to be incorporated on a non-profit basis. It's not the case that surgeons are living in poverty in Japan. It's not the case that there's some radical utopia, but where, the government looked at this and said, is it really morally consistent? And is it really, does it make sense to have something operating as a for-profit entity in what clearly has to be a kind of charitable endeavor in the public interest? So there are many of these issues, and for me, I mean, being Canadian and living in Canada, one that comes up again and again, of course, as First Nations people, our Native people, Indigenous people, the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Mohawks, the Dene, etc. And, what any of our political parties say and what they really mean when they state their policy positions on First Nations languages and their future and so on. There's really nowhere I can sit down on the political spectrum, left, right, or center, and be comfortable. So that's the situation I live with. And, I've many times said that when I go to vegan meetups, meet other vegans face-to-face, it's a process of meeting people and then finding out how little you have in common, which can be alienating and disappointing and frustrating. You meet other vegans, you look for common ground on which you can engage in some kind of cooperative activism. And instead, what you find again and again, you find out what principles or even just what aesthetic assumptions maybe separate you and make it impossible for you to get along and collaborate. Not too many days ago, I was talking to a vegan activist who I've featured on this channel. I've quoted him, and his work has turned up on this channel several times, several different contexts. A guy named Harrison Nathan. I was talking to him over Skype, and right at the beginning of the conversation, he said a number of things that were really insulting to me, really deeply insulting to me. But he said to me, just kicking it off, that he didn't believe that I supported the abolition of the slaughterhouse industry at all, that I wasn't pursuing, that he thought the goals I was pursuing were not revolutionary enough or were fundamentally not abolitionist enough. Now, that conversation with him was hilarious to me in many ways. It really convinced me this is somebody I never wanted to work with and someone I never wanted to hear from again. I'm like, okay, well, I talked to him for 3 hours, and it's like, guess what, buddy? That's you're not getting another 3 minutes out of me. I never want to talk to you again. You're someone I can't work with at all. But yeah, it was hilarious and peculiar because at the end of the conversation, he complained that he found my use of coarse language upsetting or insulting during the conversation, which wasn't directed at him. I was using coarse language in a very global way, very despairing about the nature of life on Earth sort of way. But that to me seemed really hilarious. I was like, buddy, you seem to be at a really low level of self-awareness in terms of just how insulting, and not insulting in a shallow way, how deeply insulting what you've been saying to me this last little while is, what you've said again and again, including opening by telling me that you don't even believe I'm pursuing the goals of veganism. Well, what you see in the text on screen here, this is an example of the kind of thing that separates us, right? Because what he really means is he thinks I'm not revolutionary enough because I'm not willing to pretend that in the future we're all going to love rats, and rats in return are going to love and take care of us, right? Like, that veganism is going to create this utopia where humankind and rats are living together in harmony. And no, I'm not willing to pretend that. I'm not willing to lie about that. I don't want to be part of a social and political movement that's based on a lie, and I don't want to live a lie myself. Again, I'm a moderate, but I'm a principled moderate. That's the position that I take. And then someone like him, someone like this other activist, and he does do a lot of street activism, he then perceives me as if I'm not a real vegan. No, I'm a real vegan. I'm the realest vegan of all. I'm the vegan who's willing to admit that even if you're vegan, you still have problems with rat infestations, you still have problems with managing wildlife populations, and it still leads to animals getting killed, right? So veganism is not a perfect solution. Vegans may ask all the right questions, but we don't have all the answers. You know, we have answers to some really obvious and fundamental stuff like slaughterhouses. If everyone stops eating meat, we don't need so many slaughterhouses. In fact, we need zero. You know, this is a simple one. But then when you press into, okay, how do you actually farm wheat without killing gophers, without killing rats? Guess what? We got questions and we ain't got the answers. So, you know, do you want to call yourself a revolutionary, where your revolution is based on self-delusion, deception, and lies? Or do you want to be like me? Do you want to be a moderate? And do you want to be principled in precisely the sense that you're unwilling to trade in convenient half-truths? You're unwilling to sell a lie.
À-bas-le-ciel.